Just as an introduction to appreciate the answer to this question, a Jew on the Shabbos, on the Sabbath, is not permitted to do creative activity. There are 39 classifications of creative activity, and the subcategories and derivatives of these classifications, which are also not permitted on the Torah level. One of the activities which is not permitted is slaughtering. One is not permitted to slaughter. Slaughtering means literally killing. But even to extract blood from a living being, whether it's a human being, an animal, a rodent, or something which is a living entity, is a derivative of taking life, because blood is synonymous with life. So extracting any degree of blood, especially from a human being, is considered a violation. The Torah tells us that if a child is born on the Shabbos, a male child, he must be circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. What happens if he's born on the Shabbos? That means the 8th day is the following Shabbos, Saturday. Circumcision entails surgery, minor surgery. One inflicts a wound on the child. There's blood. How is circumcision permitted on the Shabbos? So the Talmud tells us that the Torah writes an extra word, and there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. There's an extra word. It says, on the 8th day, you shall circumcise the child. So the word, there's an extra word, indicates that even if that 8th day may be Shabbos, which normally you're not permitted to violate the Shabbos, but for circumcision, which takes place on the 8th day, this supersedes the Shabbos. And you circumcise the child, despite the fact that you're creating and inflicting a wound on the child and you're letting blood. So there's discussion in the Talmud that the law is the only time one is in violation of the Shabbos if one violates any one of these 39 categories of creative activity, only if the action is constructive. But if it's destructive, there's no liability whatsoever. So the Talmud discusses, and there's an argument, seemingly, when you cut the child, you make the incision, or you perform the procedure of surgery on the child, you're cutting away. The blood is a consequence of cutting away the foreskin, peeling back the foreskin. It's a destructive act. So if it's a destructive act, why does the Torah have to go out of its way to say that even though it may be the Shabbos, circumcision supersedes the Shabbos? It's permitted because it's a destructive act. So one opinion of Talmud is that one classification of what's not permitted on Shabbos is known as makeh bepatish, bringing something to a level of perfection. For instance, if you form a cup and the cup has a rough edge on it and you sand it down to be smooth, you've put the finishing touches on that cup. Although the cup already was formed and developed, but making the cup perfect, putting on those finishing touches, this is a Torah violation. A Jew, until he's circumcised, is not considered a complete person. So although the act itself regarding the letting of blood may be considered destructive, if you only look at that detail, but in terms of the totality of the human being, of the Jew specifically, the act of circumcision brings about perfection. The Jew becomes perfect. So in essence, we're speaking about Makkah bepatish, but it's not Makkah, but we're speaking here, it's not classified as destructive, but rather constructive, because the act of letting blood here brings about a positive result. That's one opinion. Avram, our patriarch, before he was chosen to be the one to father Yitzchak, his name was Avram. Only after he became Avraham was he capable of fathering a child. When he became Avraham, it was the same time God had given the commandment to circumcise himself and circumcise his family and all members of his household. A human being has 248 parts to his body. Avraham, numerically, is 248. Only after Avram was circumcised did he become that perfect person where he had full control over every aspect of his being. So we see that circumcision, although in the detail maybe seemed to be destructive, but in terms of the totality of the person, it brings about perfection, the spiritual profile of a Jew. He's not supposed to have the foreskin, but rather the foreskin must be removed so that he should be seen as the perfect person. Now, why is circumcision considered an act of perfection? The Rechaim HaKodesh, who's a semi-Kabbalistic commentary on the Torah, writes that when God created Adam, Adam was created in a circumcised state. He did not have a foreskin. It's only after he ate of the tree of knowledge, which the Torah quantifies as the fruit that it contains good and evil, only then did he grow a foreskin. This is based on the Zohar, the Holy Zohar, that the expression of evil is covering. It's concealment. Lack of awareness, ambiguity. In Torah, in truth, there's no gray. It's black and white. It's either permitted or forbidden. There's always, the basis for question is a lack of clarity. The foreskin came about as a result of the intermingling of the evil within the human being, which creates a conflict, a craving for evil, which allows us to justify or not to appreciate the full wrongness in something which is truly forbidden. God gave us the mitzvah of circumcision to return, to be reinstated as Adam was before the sin of the tree of knowledge, to give us the sensitivities, to be less conflicted due to that evil which was ingested by Adam, which affected mankind from that moment till the end of time. This is what circumcision is. That's its value. So therefore, it's not a destructive act, but for a Jew, it's the ultimate act which gives us the ability to have a sense of spirituality, to make proper choices in our lives. The Jew, to merit redemption, had to be circumcised. Until the circumcision takes place, there is a spiritual blockage. There are obstructions. All the channels of spirituality are blocked. The only way we could have a sense of godliness, not only intellectually, although we witnessed the 10 plagues, that's intellect, abstract intellect. But to be able to internalize it, that we should be touched, our emotion, our souls should be touched, that obstruction, that evil has to be expunged from us, has to be purged, has to be extracted. And this is the circumcision process. That's the reason why the mitzvah of Milah was given. It wasn't only to give us some level of merit. When God saw us devoid, naked of spirituality and unworthy, the unworthiness we had was because we had no relevance to become the nation of God, because our spiritual system was totally shut down and defunct and not operating. That's why God specifically had to give us the mitzvah of circumcision to be a prerequisite for the redemption. And this is the verse in Yechezkel, when God saw us wallowing in the bloods. The first blood was the blood of circumcision, which represented this rehabilitative procedure, which gives us a capacity to appreciate who He is due to the removal of the foreskin. The deity of Egypt was the goat and the sheep. Until we severed the tie, the connection, the bond to that deity, there was still some degree of attachment. We had to make a public statement. We slaughter the sheep, the goat, as a consecrated offering to God. It's a negation. It's a termination of the past. The past no longer exists. We go into the future. So it wasn't just to have merit of another commandment, such as tzitzis or charity, to fulfill a positive commandment. The mitzvah had to have a ramification, a statement, a reality, which relates directly to the future of us becoming a Jewish people. The stand at Sinai 50 days after we left Egypt. This is why God specifically gave us these two mitzvos, positive commandments of circumcision and the Paschal offering.